That today would be the last devotional thought that comes out of 1 Corinthians 10, 1 through 12, but I don't think so. I think there's some more things in here. So just to kind of get us started this morning. For I do not want you to be unaware, brothers, that our fathers were all under the cloud and all passed through the sea. Now those two things designate God's presence and God's actions. So they are under the cloud, that's God's saving presence, and they pass through the sea, that's God's saving action. So all the ancient people of Israel were benefits of God's saving grace. And all were baptized into Moses, and that means they were united to Moses as the office bearer of redemption. So they were all they were good to go with God because they were following Moses. And that too involved the cloud and the sea. And all ate the same spiritual food and all drank the same spiritual drink. So they ate the manna in the desert, which was clearly a miracle of God, the spiritual food. And they drank the spiritual drink. And you'll remember several times when God provided water and a couple of times from a rock. And he goes on to say, and that rock was Christ. Nevertheless, most of them God was not pleased with, and they were overthrown in the desert. Yeah, most of them would mean all of them except for Caleb and Joshua. So because of unbelief, even though they received the grace of God, their faith was not in God's presence and God's saving actions on their behalf. Instead, it says in verses 6 through 11 that they engaged in all manner of sin. In other words, God's saving actions on their behalf and God's saving presence with them was not something they cared anything about. And Paul is reminding the complacent Corinthians who seem to be more concerned about what sins they're allowed to commit rather than what sins they're forgiven of, that kind of complacency is inconsistent with Christian faith. And so we need to be reminded of that too. We're not saved so that we can sin with impunity. That's not why. God doesn't forgive us so we can go on and just sin any way that our appetites lead us to sin, and it'll be all right. In other words, the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross was not to finance a life of sin so that we all get God's presence when we die. No, Jesus' sacrifice on the cross was so that we can be in the loving, caring presence of God right here and right now and receive the blessings of being righteous even right now because we are believing in Christ, because we have faith in Christ that God does forgive us and God does see us through the righteousness of Jesus. And that's a far cry from believing that, oh, now I can sin all I want because, Jesus financed my sinful life. So we'll finish this up tomorrow, and I kind of feel like I'm leaving you hanging, but I don't want these to be overly long. But I think this gives us a lot to think about.